The park was unusually quiet that morning. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass, and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze was the only sound that filled the silence. A few joggers passed by, their earbuds in, too lost in their own worlds to notice much around them. But on the far side of the park, under the shade of a tall oak tree, sat an old wooden bench, and on that bench sat Margaret. Her hair, once golden and full of life, was now silver, neatly tied back in a bun. Deep wrinkles lined her face like chapters of a long, difficult story, but her eyes, those soft, glowing eyes, still sparkled with something rare, peace. She wasn't dressed in anything fancy. A simple cardigan, a long skirt, and an old pair of shoes were all she wore. And yet, there was something about her presence that made her stand out. She looked fragile, but at the same time unshakably strong. A young man named Daniel walked through the park that morning. His shoulders slumped forward, his face pale with exhaustion, his eyes heavy with worry. He had just lost his job, his relationship had ended, and he felt like the world was closing in on him. Everything seemed pointless. When his eyes fell on Margaret, he noticed something unusual. She was smiling. Not the kind of polite smile people wear in public, but a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. Daniel stopped in his tracks. How could this old woman, who clearly didn't look wealthy or privileged, sit there smiling as if life was a beautiful gift? Curiosity pulled him closer. Without much thought, Daniel sat down beside her. After a moment of silence, he asked quietly, almost embarrassed by his own words, "Excuse me, may I ask you something?" Margaret turned to him with a soft smile. "Of course, dear. How do you do it?" He blurted out. "How can you smile when life looks so hard?" Margaret chuckled softly, as if she had been asked this question many times before. She folded her hands on her lap and leaned slightly toward Daniel. "You see, young man," she began gently, "life is never easy for anyone, not for you, not for me. The trick isn't to wait for things to get perfect. It's to find happiness even when they're not." Daniel frowned. "But how? Everything in my life feels like it's falling apart. I've lost my job, I have bills to pay, and I can't see any reason to smile." Margaret nodded slowly, listening with the patience of a grandmother. "I understand, but happiness, my dear, doesn't come from what we have. It comes from how we see what we have. I don't have much myself. My husband passed away 10 years ago, and my children live in other states. My health isn't strong anymore, and yet—" She paused, looking at the sky as a group of birds flew by. "I wake up each day grateful for the sunrise, for the sound of children playing in the distance, for the simple blessing of still being here, able to smile." Daniel looked at her, puzzled. To him, this sounded too simple, almost impossible. "So, you're saying happiness is a choice?" Margaret smiled even wider. "Exactly. We can choose to complain about what's missing, or we can choose to celebrate what's still here. And believe me, there's always something left to be grateful for even in the darkest times." Her words sank into Daniel like gentle raindrops on dry soil. Something about her tone, calm, certain, full of lived experience, made him listen. He wanted to know more. Seeing his curiosity, Margaret's smile softened and her voice grew more serious. "Let me tell you a story," she said. "Years ago, I lost everything. My house caught fire one winter night. I stood outside in the cold, shivering, with nothing but the clothes on my back. Everything was gone. The furniture, the kitchen I loved, the warm bed, the photo albums, the little things my husband and I had collected over the years gone in a few hours. I had no place to go, no savings left. I was already a widow then. It was the darkest time of my life." Daniel's eyes widened. How did you survive that?" Margaret looked down for a moment, her fingers trembling slightly as if the memory still lived in her hands. Then she answered quietly, "I decided to find one reason to smile every single day, just one. Some days it was the kindness of a neighbor offering me soup. Other days it was the sound of rain against the window. And one day it was nothing more than looking at a single old chair that had survived the fire. That chair and an old photo album were the only things I had left from my home. But instead of crying over all I had lost, I chose to smile at what little remained." She took a deep breath. "That choice didn't erase the pain, but it gave me strength to keep moving, and over time, I rebuilt my life, not with wealth or luxury, but with gratitude. Gratitude for small blessings became the foundation of my happiness." Daniel sat in silence, his throat tight. He realized he had never once looked for small reasons to smile. He had been waiting for big successes to bring him happiness, and in doing so, he had missed all the little joys along the way. The park grew quieter as Daniel sat there, deeply moved by Margaret's story. He thought about his own life, about the warm meals he still had, the roof over his head, the friends who occasionally checked in on him. He thought about the sun rising each morning, even when his heart felt heavy. Tears welled in his eyes. I never thought of it that way, he whispered. Margaret gently placed her fragile, wrinkled hand on his. That's because most of us are trained to look for happiness in big achievements, in money, in recognition. But true happiness is created moment by moment. It lives in gratitude. It lives in kindness. It lives in sharing what little joy we have with others. Daniel swallowed hard, his chest rising and falling with emotion. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, he felt lighter. It was as though the heavy burden of complaints he carried was slipping off his shoulders. He looked at Margaret with newfound respect. "You've changed how I see everything," he said softly. Margaret smiled again, her eyes twinkling like sunlight on water. "Not me, dear. You changed it yourself. You just needed someone to remind you of the truth." A few days later, Daniel returned to the park. This time he carried a small bouquet of flowers. He wanted to thank Margaret for the gift she had given him. Not flowers, not money, but wisdom that had lifted his spirit. But when he reached the bench, she wasn't there. He waited for an hour, then another, but she never came. Disappointed, he placed the flowers on the bench, hoping she would find them. Just then, Daniel noticed another person sitting a few feet away on the same bench. A middle-aged man with hunched shoulders and a sorrowful expression, staring blankly at the ground. Daniel recognized that look. It was the same hopelessness he had worn days earlier. Without hesitation, Daniel sat beside the man. At first, there was silence. Then, remembering Margaret's words, Daniel began to share the old woman's story. He told him about the fire, about the chair, about choosing one reason to smile each day. As he spoke, the man's eyes lifted slightly, a faint spark of hope flickering within them. And in that moment, Daniel felt something extraordinary. He wasn't just repeating Margaret's lesson, he was living it. He was creating happiness by sharing kindness just as she had done for him. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt truly happy. His problems hadn't disappeared. His bills were still there, his challenges remained. But now he understood the secret Margaret had carried so gracefully. Happiness is not found. It is created in gratitude, in kindness, in every small moment we choose to see as a gift. And so, under the shade of that old oak tree, the cycle continued. One heart healed, another heart lifted. In the end, Margaret's simple wisdom revealed a truth we often forget. Happiness isn't something we wait for. It's something we create. Life will always bring struggles, loss, and uncertainty. But in every situation, there is still a reason to smile, still a blessing to notice, still kindness to give. Daniel walked away transformed, carrying forward the gift of gratitude and sharing it with others. And that is the legacy of true happiness. It multiplies when it is shared. So, whenever life feels heavy, remember Margaret's words, happiness is not found, it is created, moment by moment. Choose gratitude. Choose kindness, and you will find happiness, no matter the situation.